Hey everyone, it's Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where I just get to sit down and have a lovely chat with some other writers. And it's it's mostly it's a highly unscripted conversation. It's very much mostly unresearched as well. I research a little bit about my guests before talking to them. Some of them I already know, some of them I don't. But I don't want the conversation to be very one-sided where I know everything about them. It's very much more interesting to me to just kind of treat it like I'm meeting them at a cocktail party and want to know everything about them. And I think, I get maybe some more personal information that way. I think maybe people tend to open up a little bit more when it's not just the typical stock questions that most authors get during interviews. So today is... What is today? Today is May 20th. So I think this episode will be coming out next week. And it is actually snowing outside my window here in Erie, Colorado. It is coming down and we're supposed to get like 4 to 8 inches of snow. It's like one of the latest snows that we've ever had in the, to date, May 20th. So, and I think there were a lot of graduations that were happening today. A lot of high school graduations that are either moving inside or moving to Sunday. But this would be a completely disastrous, terrible day to be standing outside listening to 400 kids' names being read slowly. So today on the show, I spoke to Jess Montgomery. So Jess Montgomery is the author of the Kinship Historical Mysteries series, which is inspired by true life 1920s female sheriff in Appalachia. So historical fiction, I love it. She's very good at what she does. And her latest book, which just came out, less than a month ago, March 29th, The Echoes. So it looks fantastic, and it did get a starred review from Kirkus, who writes an evocative and beautifully written tale of hardship, love, and kinship. So that's pretty badass. And it was great talking to her. She had a lot of fantastic insights about her progression as an author, coming from a technical writing background. So she was very interesting to talk to. I hope you enjoy the conversation. This is me talking to Jess Montgomery.
I'm good. How about you?
I am fine, thank you. It's a rare occasion for me that I'm actually not in my office. This is a green screen of another library, so
I wondered. I thought, wow, that's a very artful library.
Mine is pretty good, but it's not
sure.
this. This is a little bit more cluttered than the one that I have at home. I don't like all the little books stacked on top of other ones.
Yeah, I like everything straight up and by author and genre.
But I don't do by color. I think that's like an abomination.
It is. I judge people for that.
Oh, yeah.
I do.
As you should. So I noticed one thing we have in common, because I was on your website, was we both use Maddie with Zuni for our website.
Isn't she great? I love her.
Yeah, Maddie is great. So just for anyone listening or watching, and if you're an author, inspiring author, or you're trying to build your website, and she's not paying me to say this, but Zuni.com, Maddie James, only specializes in author websites. So she and Riley know what they're doing.
They do.
Yeah, I just realized it's been 10 years that I've been using her. So it's been a long time. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How about yourself?
Good. Where are you?
I'm just outside of Dayton, Ohio. So the southwestern corner of Ohio.
Okay. Are you born and raised there, or?
I am. Yeah. I'm a first generation Buckeye, which my family of origin never let me forget. Both sides of my family are from Eastern Kentucky, Appalachia, and my parents were part of the great diaspora north. And I'm a late in life baby, and that's why I ended up being the first kid on either side, born in Ohio. There were kids after me that were born in Ohio. So yeah, Dayton, Ohio.
my daughter's a freshman at college, and she had to choose between Ohio State and Michigan State, and she went with Michigan. and we definitely got some flack from Ohio fans. But
Well, Michigan State's fine. Well, at least it wasn't University of Michigan. And I don't know if we can even continue this conversation.
well,
I'm kidding.
She got waitlisted there.
Well, that's just how they are up there,
Yeah, exactly. No, but Michigan State has got a pretty phenomenal criminology program, and that's what she wants to. She's a little obsessed with serial killers, so she fancies herself the next Clarice Starling. So she's studying psychology and criminal justice and criminology. So
good for her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does she like the show You, then?
Oh my God. She won't stop talking about it. Yeah. She loves it.
Sorry.
The Ted Bundy tapes, all that stuff. Yeah. She loves for sure. So, I guess being a crime fiction writer, we definitely have some things in common. I'll see now, there's my little green screen is like, oh, it's going to be annoying. Just ignore if you see little flashes like that.
Okay. I thought maybe it was a space alien trying to break through from the other side.
Well, that would be a story.
That would.
So you're growing up in Ohio, and what is that childhood like? Like, is it pretty pleasant? Are you at the library all the time? Where does the love for books come about?
Oh yeah. So it's an interesting mix, being culturally Appalachian, but growing up in the Midwest. So there's, Midwesterners are very pointedly polite if they're annoyed. I mean, there's just this whole thing that goes with being Midwestern.
Yeah.
But it's a pleasant place to live. It's a pleasant place to have grown up. My personal childhood, which does not reflect on Appalachia or the Midwest, was very chaotic, I will say. So I turned to books as refuge, as I think many people do. And I found this whole other world through books. And a lot of time at the library. My dad only went through 8th grade, a very smart man, but he just went through 8th grade, partly because of where he grew up and when he grew up, but partially because he had a reading disability. And yet, he would go to the library with a box of my books and in his pickup truck to the library to return them. And then I would collect more, so on his way to his tool and die shop, he'd drop off books for me. So, not a lot of books in my home growing up, but definitely at least, some support, like, yes.
So you were the reader of the family, though.
I was the reader of the family. And, his sister, my aunt, she, obviously they grew up in the same place, and she went on to high school and college and got a PhD. And so it's very much like, go study things.
Yeah.
So a lot of encouragement that way.
So your parents were always, planning for you to go to college and all, or
I was planning for me to go to college.
Yeah.
My mom also went to college. My dad put her through college, which is pretty remarkable for a good old boy with an 8th grade education.
It is.
So I think it is. He was the feminist, didn't know he was a feminist. So he's rolling over in his grave going, "You called me a what?" But he was. And my mom wanted me to go to college. So I went to college locally at Wright State University, go Raiders, studied English, and then went on to Bowling Green and studied tech writing because I didn't want to be a school teacher, but I did want to make a living. So tech writing was the way to go.
Yeah. So that's interesting because, a lot of people I've spoken to, and probably a lot of people, other writers who know early on that they want to write, which is not my experience. I didn't start writing until my 30s. But a lot of people went and got that English degree and then perhaps got an MFA and had almost from what I've, anecdotally, almost zero clue of how to actually make a living writing. So it sounds like you at least were aware that, this is going to be a struggle no matter what avenue of writing I go down, journalism, whatever, it's a struggle.
Yeah,
Because technical writing is very specific.
Mm-hmm.
So you must
Mm-hmm.
have researched that and seen that there was, jobs available in it. And
Kind of. So I- Also on my dad's side of the family, I had a great uncle who was a poet and taught
hmm,
create literature at University of Cincinnati. So I was aware that you could combine writing with something else through him. I also started reading Writer's Digest, and full disclosure, I now write for them, but it's true. I mean, I've read their magazine almost my whole life. So I was aware of studying creative writing in that way. And I loved literature. I loved majoring in English. And I thought, oh, I'll get a master's or PhD in literature and I'll teach it at a university. I had this very romantic notion, which I have since realized was so very romantic, of what it would be like to be a literature professor. And I did well enough in college that I started getting these little brochures which show up in the mail,
yeah.
back in the day when there was like postal mail with a stamp and you had to go to the mailbox to get the mail. And this brochure showed up from Bowling Green State University that listed their programs and included technical writing. And I was like, what's that?
Yeah.
Did a little research, found out they at the time were one of 3 schools in the whole country that had a program in technical writing. And I love science. If I had to do it over, I probably would have majored in biology, or at least double majored or minored. And I thought,
Yeah.
you know what, technical writing, I could do that. So I went off, and it was a great utilitarian degree, because it did lead to my first jobs, and that led to experience that led to other jobs. So
it's such a left brain, right brain kind of way of approaching it,
Yeah.
right? You don't mesh an English major and a love of literature necessarily with a desire for technical writing.
Right.
Did you, as you're studying that, did you have an affinity or a plan at that point, even while you were studying technical writing, that I do want to write that novel someday?
Oh yeah. I started writing. I'm obnoxious. I started writing when I was little, so
that is
precocious.
obnoxious.
I was like, it's very obnoxious, and I'm so sorry. My great grandmother started writing poetry when she was 90 something. She fell in love with an 80 something young man at the corner store. So you can start writing at any age. We found the poetry after she passed away at like 102.
Wow.
But I knew when I was probably 6 or 7 that I wanted to be a writer, and put together a little book and wrote on, gave it a construction paper cover, and on the inside wrote "published by Little Golden Books," and sold it to an aunt for a penny. So I was a mercenary, even as like a 7-year-old.
So you went professional early.
I went professional early. It was a print run of 1 copy that later got remainder back to me. But
that's what makes it so valuable.
Exactly. It's a
limited first
item.
edition.
That's right. Very limited. Piece of juvenilia. But I knew I wanted to, I always knew I wanted to write stories. So yeah, when I did my technical program, there was also a creative writing program at Bowling Green, which was new. I mean, there weren't like a lot of MFAs that long ago around, at least that I was aware of. And so I didn't really stalk the creative writing lecturer, but I kind of hung outside of his office a lot. It was like, I know I'm on the other side of the building in the tech program, but here's a short story. He finally gave in and read one and was like, yeah, keep writing. So at least he was encouraging.
Do you still have any contact with Bowling Green at all, or?
Not really. No.
I didn't know if you knew David Bell, the novelist.
Oh,
David
yeah.
Bell.
Yeah.
I believe he teaches there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I've gotten to know him pretty well. He was one of my first guests on. We have a very similar trajectory. And but yeah, so he teaches writing there, and yeah, he's got some good stories.
I bet. The tech writing students going, please read my story.
Right. So you're out in the real world after school, and you're writing technically.
Technically.
Are you? So what is kind of the career path that you have in your mind at that point?
Oh, wow. So you mean in terms of fiction?
Anything like what?
Anything?
Because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people who, again, have that very early desire for writing novels or writing fiction. And I what I found is that if it's with you when you're 7, 8, 10 years old, that's a real thing. That's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away.
And so I've talked to many people who've had that very early on, maybe as late as 14, 15, but that's always, and they've gone to all these different career paths, maybe writing related, maybe not, but that thing is always there. And eventually it's going to come out however it comes out. And it might not come out till your 40s, but what was it for you?
Well, for me, I did creative writing in tandem with, writing related jobs for almost my whole life. I tended to go in 10-year chunks for whatever reason. So, while I was starting out as a tech writer, I tried to write a novel and it was terrible. And I didn't even finish it. And then I tried to write a romance novel and I sent it off. And an editor said, well, this is good, but the hero's a wimp. Which apparently was a bad thing. Now I think he would just be sensitive and appealing. So maybe I should pull that back out. And then I realized by then, my husband and I married my high school sweetheart. By then we had moved to California and we were living in the middle of the Mojave Desert. And I went to the library and realized, I'm trying to write romances, but what I'm reading are mysteries. Duh. Lesson 1.
Right.
The genre that you can't stop reading is probably the genre you should be writing in. So I worked on, I wrote a couple of, I wrote a mystery and I finished it and I learned a lot about writing mysteries. By then we'd moved back to Ohio and I was still working as a tech writer. And I went to the Antioch Writers Workshop and there was this up and coming writer by the name of Sue Grafton who happened to be teaching. And she gave me great advice and kind of remained a mentor that I stayed in touch with, like every 5 years, check in, or I check in with her. Then finally, I wrote a mystery novel that found a publishing home as with Fawcett Books. So I had 3 books, paperback original, and then 6 more in a different series, and then a standalone novel. And now as Jess Montgomery, I write these historical mysteries published by Minotaur Books. So all along, I worked in tech writing until I realized the company I worked for wanted me to go into management. And it was kind of like being a school teacher. No, thank you. It seems like
it's going to take away from my writing.
It's going to, well, and that's a great point. I very much wanted to balance, having a job, but having energy and time left over to write. So I moved from that to marketing, which was more fun and creative than tech writing. And then I had a marketing solo practice for a little while when our daughters were wee little. And then I ended up running that Antioch Writers Workshop for a few years. Yeah. So I've had this sort of adjacent career alongside always writing novels. Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same way. And I didn't, that's a question I'm sure you get asked a lot too, is like, how do you maintain that balance? Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is it's not all that hard, right? Like
in a lot of ways, it's really not. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what your other job is and the demands of your other job. But say you have like a 40-hour a week job, to find an hour a day, 7 days a week to write, which is what I do, is not a ton of time. And and for me, I'm not super prolific, but I'm a book a year. And
it's great.
It's pretty achievable if you do that. But it's all about the consistency, right? You can't wait for the muse. You have to sit down.
You absolutely can't. That's
when the muse is there, it's great. And maybe you'll be twice as productive in that hour. But Other times it's like data entry and it's miserable and you're just like, hey, I'm getting it done. And I know I'm going to end up deleting a lot of this stuff, but because that's the thing that really holds up so many aspiring writers is just getting it done. That is the hardest thing to do, is to finish the book, even knowing that it's just going to be a terrible book and that it'll come alive in the editing. Just get it done. But that is the wall that stops 90% of people, I think. I don't know if that's
laying down that first draft, that's the least favorite. I think the muse comes, you invite the muse in, you woo the muse when you're coming up with, when you've been tickled by this story idea that won't let you go. At least that's how it feels to me. And, I love that stage of coming up with the characters and their motivations and how they conflict with each other and how they interact and laying out a plot. And then you have to actually write a draft.
Yeah.
That's painful.
So you're outlining ahead of time.
Not chapter by chapter, but I create a pretty strong scaffold for myself. And I think that actually goes back to tech writing, because
that makes sense.
You had to lay out, an outline, and it was very technical, very detailed. Yeah. And so I think that influenced me as a fiction writer. I admire, but I cannot imagine being a writer who sits down, has no idea other than a glimmer, and just turns out 3 pages. I mean, I can't do that.
That's how I write. Yeah. And I feel the exact same way about people who outline, because I've tried to outline and I just can't do it. I mean, I get, I'll get somewhat of an outline done, and then I get impatient and I'm like, okay, let me at least write what I've already outlined, which maybe is a 10th of the book. And then immediately I start off-roading, because I'm constantly thinking of new things that wouldn't have occurred to me had I just sat there, I don't think, and tried to outline. But I think it boils down to what makes you happy. Like how do you derive joy when you're writing? And to me, it is the not knowing, and it is the, when you talk about creating conflict with your characters and playing all that out, I love to just see like, well, what if this just happened here? And what does that mean? That excites me. Now it results in a mess. and I don't know my endings until I'm about 80-90% in. And then all of a sudden like, okay, now I'm gonna have to totally change the first half of this book.
What's funny for me is I think I know the ending every time. And then I get to about 30 pages before the end, and a couple weeks before my deadline, and I realize, oh, that's not the killer. So I kind of think we all are working, everybody cooks with gas. We're all working with the same process. It's just how it emanates from each of us. It's maybe depends on our personality or the training we've had in the past,
Yeah. And I think right. I think training for sure, what works best for you. And I think about classical structure. I mean, so my training is nothing, right? It's all self-trained, and it was a long road to figure out how to write. Which exists to this day. But there's a freedom in that too, because I don't sit down and think about, okay, this is a 3-act structure, and these things have to happen in each act, and the mystery has to get solved at the end.
Right.
It's talking about genre, that you writing mysteries, there's an expectation with that word. When that word is on the back of your cover, that's a mystery. You've set a pretty big expectation for your readership.
Yes.
Something is going to be solved at the end. As a thriller writer, there might be a mystery, but I don't so much care. And that's my own problem. I probably should, because people complain well, the mystery didn't get solved. I'm like, well, it's not a mystery. It's
a thriller.
It's a story about this person and what happened to them. Yeah. And not all mysteries, not all things in our lives are solved, but that's not necessarily satisfying to a readership. So I struggle with that for sure. But it sounds like you make sure this is a mystery, especially if it's a series. Yeah. I assume that you try to follow not maybe the same outline, but the same structure that your readership has come to expect.
Yeah, and that I, as a mystery fan, expect. I expect there's going to be a crime, probably a murder. There's going to be somebody who wants to figure out why. They need to have a good motivation. Even, my main character is a professional sheriff, but I want her to have a motivation other than this is her job. There needs to be some personal connection, not necessarily like she knew the victim, but like some part of what her arc will be in that particular book as to why she wants to solve it. And then, it needs to, play fair with the reader, solve the crime. I've got a cat in my lap. That's why I keep looking down. You saw the tail pop up.
I did. It's like a shark fin.
Yeah.
So what was I want to jump back in a minute, but what was the desire or the interest or the impetus for choosing to change your name and start writing a series?
So my other books, I actually, my first book in this series, The Widows, I did not think was going to be a series. I thought it was a standalone. And my editor was the one who pointed out, you've created this vast world. There's a lot you could do with this as a series. And I'm really glad I listened to her. That was smart of her to suggest and smart of me to listen. My pen name is Jess Montgomery for these books. And the impetus was that the Kinship Mysteries are historical. They're set in the 1920s. They're more, I don't want to say dark as in not sinister dark, but there's sort of, a darkness, kind of like a ballad or a gospel song would have perhaps some darkness in it, set in Appalachia. So very different in some ways from what I'd published before. And so my agent actually was the one who suggested, and I'm glad I listened to her. I always do, or I always end up listening to her, even if I at first think no. And then I think, oh, daggone it, she's right again. So she suggested it was, what I was writing was different enough that a little brand resetting might be appropriate with a pen name. So that's fine.
You have, and I'm always fascinated by pen names. How do you market yourself? Do you have like two different websites? Or is it all kind of under an umbrella?
I have the one very beautiful, professionally, awesomely done website is Jess Montgomery that Maddie at Zuni does. Shout out to that company yet again. And then I have one is Sharon that is, it's very,
it's a little dated.
It exists on the internet. It is not nearly, it's a good example of why you should hire somebody to do your website. No, it's okay. It's got all the pertinent information there. And I write for Writer's Digest as Sharon Short, but it says at the bottom, writes novels as Jess Montgomery. Right. So, and if you look inside a Jess Montgomery novel, you'll see copyright Sharon Short. So it's not like it's a state secret. It's, a lot of writers have pen names. But when I'm, most, like all my author events are as Jess Montgomery. Right. And I signed novels Jess Montgomery, and it hasn't been weird at all. I mean, at first it was a little weird.
Yeah. But it's such a different name than your other name. It's not even like similar enough where you can kind of like, oh yeah, right. It sounds like they're calling my name.
Which is kind of fun because, if I start to get
escapism,
really nervous or insecure, I'm not a naturally confident person. I have to kind of really work at that. I think, well, Sharon might find this intimidating to write this difficult, stirring scene, but Jess, of course, can do it. So
that's right. That's good. That's right.
Yeah.
Eventually it will bleed over into a split personality, but as long as you're getting good marketing out of it. Well, so that's an interesting point you bring up about, you're not necessarily the type of person who's putting herself out there. Marketing and promotion is kryptonite to many authors, right? Because many authors are introverts, really. At least a lot of them that I know that I've spoken to, they're very happy with their laptop in a closet, writing their stories. And God forbid they should show somebody their stories, much less promote them.
Yes.
But you reached out to me.
I did.
You have put yourself out there, and have you grown more comfortable with it? Do you see the necessity of it, of the social media, the public speaking, that aspects of it?
Mhm. Well, I think part of what makes me a little more comfortable than you might think, because I am an introvert, is that I worked in marketing. So,
Oh,
but I was
true.
marketing other people and products.
Right.
So that wasn't hard because it wasn't me that I was marketing. But
Right.
I recognize and understand that I've created a book, several books. These are products. How is the world going to know about them if I and my team at Minotaur don't tell people? I do think the best marketing is word of mouth, but you have to get that started. You got to get that first domino to fall so that there are people who can talk about it.
Right.
So I try to focus on things I love to do. Like I love to be on podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not shy about giving speeches for whatever reason. I'm just not.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's fine. I'm fine with that. One-on-one at a cocktail party.
That's interesting. Yeah.
A microphone with 500 people in the audience. Sure. I used to write email newsletters as a marketing professional. So I enjoy doing that. Social media, I kind of do that because I know I need to. Although I do very much like interacting with, I've made fans who that's how they interact with me directly, is via social media. And that I do enjoy because I feel like I'm talking to a reader, which is fun. And I'm talking to them in a way that isn't possible otherwise. So,
yeah, I mean, the whole business side of it is I have a business background. And so I've always been fascinated by the business of publishing. And I think you're right. I mean, even with my very first book, I hired my own PR person. And with the belief system is like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to measure the return on this investment. But to your point, yeah, and you can't control word of mouth, but you can elevate the book. You can give it a fighting chance.
Yes.
Because if you do nothing, almost nothing will happen.
That's absolutely right.
I mean, if you rely, and I'm with Sourcebooks, who has blown me away with, their PR and marketing efforts. But you can't just rely on, your publisher. And your publisher needs you. You're part of a team and you need to be part of that. But I think it is about, like, I think you said it perfectly. You do what you love, because if an author starts doing PR and marketing that they don't love, it is obvious. And,
it is.
It's like people who give, when I teach, I'm like, if don't do a reading if you're not good at it or if you don't like it, because nobody wants to hear a bad reader. It's not going to help you.
Yeah. You should stick to things you love. So, I've never really embraced Twitter. For example, I have a Twitter account, but mostly I go on, just because I feel obligated once a week to see if somebody's tagged me, to see, because there are certainly people who have boosted my books, who love Twitter, and they're really good at it. So I feel like if they're tagging me, then I should thank them. So I'm on Twitter minimally for that. But then other things, that I enjoy, that's what I put my energy into. But I try to put most of my energy into writing.
Yeah, well, that's true too. I mean, I got rid of Twitter probably about a year ago. I'm just like, I'm never on this. Like, nobody's dying because I'm not here. But Instagram is a very fertile ground for book discussion, and there's a lot of people who are tremendous readers who will very happily promote your book and who are wonderful. And that's kind of a happy, safe space for me in terms of social media. But yeah, it is a struggle for sure. So now that you have many, many, many books under your belt, and you have, it seems like most of the momentum right now for you is as Jess Montgomery.
Right.
Do you have, is your mind like, let's just keep this going? Let's keep, I'm going to keep with the series for a while, no end in sight, or are you, thinking about pivoting to something else?
I'm happy to keep writing as Jess, whether it's the series, the fourth book in the series comes out March 29th of 22. So, so the series is fresh and still building and growing, but I'm also playing with some ideas that are standalones that work as Jess. And so that's been interesting and fun.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm happy to stick in that realm.
I think it's interesting, and I've never written a series before. All my books are standalone, and I have nothing against series, and I would probably be better off were I to write a series. But I always like that world building each time, and pick another place that I've never been to before, and pick characters that have never entered my mind until now, and then be able to kill them whenever I want.
That's funny.
but the fact that you've written standalones and series, that's got to be a little bit, sometimes I would think, and I'm just projecting here, a little bit of a tug of war internally of like, if I were writing a series, I know I would want my next book to be a standalone. I just know that. And then vice versa, just to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I have this line, which it sounds kind of hokey, but it's absolutely true, which is serve the story.
Yeah.
And so, for example, as Sharon Short, my last published novel was My One Square Inch of Alaska. And it's a standalone. I mean, theoretically, I could write a follow-up, but there's no point because I thematically said what I wanted to say in that story. And to write another book with those same characters later on, I think would diminish the first book. So, in that case, it works as a standalone. It's great. And The Widows, which is the first book in my Kinship series as Jess Montgomery, I saw it as a standalone.
Right.
And it's, each book you can read as a standalone. But I think my editor made a great point. She said, you've got this whole geographical world, this world carved out of a time and a place, and you've got this huge cast of characters. You could really explore this. And I started thinking about the themes in The Widows and, what I wanted to say. And I realized, she's really right. So as long as that remains true, I'm happy to keep going with that series.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's such the pitching of series is such a catch-22 because I find it interesting that your editor is the one who made that overture, because a lot of times it's like, well, we don't know how strong the first book is going to be. We don't want to commit to a series at this point.
Right.
And you're like, well, that doesn't help me at all because I might have certain ideas for it. And it's funny with series versus standalone because I think also your attitude can change over time. Like, because your Alaska book could be 10 years later, you're like, you know what? I'm not done with that one character yet. And it's funny how they kind of come back. I've had that before where like, I wonder what that person's up to now.
Yeah. They seem so real, don't they? These characters we make up in our heads.
Yeah, it's weird, and then it is very, very much real. And then when you start getting reviews or feedback about how that character meant something to somebody else, it's really weird because it won't be at all what it meant to you because they're living their own experiences and they're having their own involvement with that character. And and it's just, it's very disembodying. All of a sudden you're like, wait, what? Isn't that strange?
Yeah, it's strange, but it's so beautiful. I mean, it's sort of the magic, to kind of borrow from Stephen King, who talked about writing and reading as magic. It's the magic that we can create because I as a writer, you as a writer, we dream up these stories, these people. And like you say, then it's out in the world and readers get to engage with it in their own way. And so they're kind of recreating what you've created. And it's lovely.
And there's never congruency between how you feel about anything about your book or your expectations of the book for somebody else. Like, you'll be writing a chapter like this chapter is going to land hard and it's going to be great and it's going to be this emotional thing, and then nobody ever mentions it, or they'll mention a secondary character that they love, and you're like, oh, that was kind of, that person was just serving a role, and I have zero emotion attached to this character, but that was a super meaningful character. So I always, and this, it never syncs up with what you're thinking about the book, at least in my experience at all. You know, it's just like write it and just hope for the best after that and just see what happens.
Absolutely.
I'm in that weird 2-week window where I just submitted my next book to my publisher, and I'll get you comments in a couple of weeks. And just like, oh God, I'm just sitting there like, and it's totally, it's a different kind of book. So I'm like, oh, I don't, they're going to hate it.
What are they going to think? Of course, we always go there, right? We always think the worst, like they're going to hate it. It's never, oh, they're going to love it.
well, don't you hate your books by the time you're done writing them?
Yeah. I mean,
hate's a strong word.
Not hate, but when I'm really in the weeds, it's hard to know how to feel about what I'm writing. And so now my husband jokes, like, every time, dear, that you say, oh, this book is terrible, it'll never succeed, that's when he goes, this is going to be good. Yeah. Which cracks me up. But it's also funny sometimes, you know, to encounter your older work or, you know, from a couple books ago. And sometimes I'll see things like, I'd phrase that differently if I could just have one more copy edit of this book that's been printed. Yep. But other times I'll think, I wrote.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
That's pretty good. Wow. It's like this person knew what they were doing. Totally.
And I very rarely go back and look at anything. But when I have to do a reading and I'm picking a passage to read and I want to make sure it doesn't exceed the time, you start editing it down and you're like, why did I not do this at the beginning? Because it's so much tighter and better now. You'll never be, letting go is the most important thing to do as an author. Like, you have to just be like, it's in the wild. There's nothing I can do. I'm moving on my merry way. So, but yeah. Well, I'm very excited for your book, your second book to come out. That's it's a fun time. It never grows old, does it?
It does not. It's actually the fourth book in the series.
The fourth in the series. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I'm excited for it too. Yeah.
Good for you. Well, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we have our own little storytelling to do.
That's right.
This is the making up part of the show. And so I have 3 books with me, and I'm going to have you just choose one. I just kind of pulled them off my bookshelf, and then we'll pick a random sentence, and then we'll just go back and forth, however we want to do it, and just for a couple minutes. So I don't have a huge memory of 2 of these books, but they're on my bookshelf. J.F. Friedman's The Disappearance.
Oh, good title. I like that.
Shirley Rousseau Murphy's Cat on the Edge, which is relevant for the cat in your room.
Yes.
And Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Oh, it's fading in and out with my green screen.
Wow.
It's the same color as my green. So
that's funny. Well, I've got to go with Cat on the Edge, of course, because we've had a cat in the background. So
I don't remember where I got this book. It looks very old. So pick a sentence, pick a page between 1 and 275. It's a short book.
Between 1 and 275. Okay. 142.
Okay. And pick a sentence between 1 and 5.
4.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to read this, and then if you want to go first, then just give me a sentence or 2 that continues the story, however you want to, and then I'll go back and forth.
That's great.
But when she glanced up and saw him, she looked startled and embarrassed.
She couldn't believe that the potion she gave him actually worked, and horns grew out of his head.
See, he said, I told you I was a little horny. No, scratch that. What the hell did you do to me? He asked her.
Well, I needed to know who you really were inside, she replied. And so I gave you the herbal tea that's been in my family for years to see what would emerge.
Well, you've turned me into a freak. He reached up and touched the horns, the hard scales, and a frown grew over his face. Is there any way you can put me back to how I was?
No, she said, I'm so sorry, but perhaps this will make you feel better. And she stood up, turned around, and angel wings popped out of her back.
So he looked at her. Do you think we can make this work? I mean, look at us. Is this something that you could envision being with for the rest of your life?
But of course, she said, opposites attract.
He walked over to her and asked her if he could hug her. When she softly nodded, he reached out and embraced her. And immediately her angel wings crumbled into dust. What does that mean? He asked.
She groaned. And then her eyes grew wide. And she said, pat the top of your head. And he realized the devil horns were finally gone as well.
All right, I think we'll call it there. I mean, we got a nice little fantasy story going there.
Yeah. And there's a theme there. You know, they found each other and
Angel Devil.
We could revise it. It could be good.
That's right. It all comes alive in the editing, doesn't it?
That's right. That was just the first draft, people.
Well,
without
listen,
an outline.
Right, exactly. You see, this is my world. It was great talking to you today, and I'm excited for you. But you said March 29th, the book is coming out?
Yes, The Echoes, March 29th. Yep.
Right around the corner. Well, congratulations, and wish you all continued success. And maybe I'll see you at BoucherCon or Thriller Fest or.
Yep, I'm going to be at BoucherCon, so
sounds good. I will see you there.
Right.
Take care.
Thank
Nice
you.
chatting. Bye.
Bye-bye.
So that's it. That's my conversation with Jess Montgomery. She was fantastic, and I had a really great time chatting with her. Again, her newest book is out now. It just came out about a month ago, and it's called The Echoes, and it looks fantastic. If you want to know more about Jess, just go to her website, jessmontgomeryauthor.com. If you want to know more about me or sign up for my newsletter, please, I'm trying to get more people signing up for my newsletter because I spend a lot of time working on it, and they're really good. Just go to carterwilson.com. That's it for now. More episodes coming out soon. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care.